Welcome to the Fearless Happiness Podcast, where we showcase phenomenal individuals who have overcome serious traumas, life obstacles, and challenges to find their own path to fearless happiness. Listen as Max Njist invites guests from all around the world to share their experiences and spread strength, hope, and faith. This is the Fearless Happiness Podcast, and this is Max Njist.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this world. It's Max from the Fearless Happiness Podcast. And again, today I have a very special and amazing guest joining me. Yes, I know I say it all the time, but it's true. They're getting better and better every day. God is blessing me with these awesome guests. So, Estil, said it right. What I like to do is have you introduce yourself to my audience, like who you are, what it is you do, and then you and I are going to rock and roll.
Right on. Well, thank you for having me, Max. My name is Estil Wallace. I am 20 years sober, recovery veteran. So I'm a recovery advocate, I guess you could say. Beyond that, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. Like being with my family. I like helping new drug addicts and alcoholics find God. And I love the game of business and finance.
Well, you and I are going to have a great time, right?
I'm excited.
I've been clean and sober for almost 22 years, so it's good to have, I don't know, but some of my friends are calling me an old timer, right? And
I think they keep moving the goalpost on that. When I was newly sober, I think it was 25 years. I think it's as long as 40 now.
That's what I thought,
which is nonsense because I'll be 21 in a couple of weeks.
Oh, congratulations. So Thanks. It's good to have a brother in recovery here. Right. The second part of what you said, I'm still learning, right? The whole entrepreneur.
Sure. We all are.
I had a friend who said, Max, it's not for the faint of heart. So be prepared. And
that's true.
Oh my God, he was so correct. But tell us a little bit about your backstory and like what got you from where you were to where you are today and helping people recover and understand the entrepreneur world and stuff like that.
Well, I got sober in my late 20s, back in 2004, in Phoenix after, being homeless on the streets here and going through the throes of a relatively low bottom alcoholic. There are worse stories than mine, but there's some better ones too. I was fairly low on the totem pole. Got sober in an old school halfway house in central Phoenix. It's kind of in the hood, gunshots on a regular old Tuesday night. And I got sober the way a lot of people do, living in a halfway house. There was some structure. I went to 12-step meetings. I got a sponsor. I felt a little out of place at first and wasn't sure what this was all about. But having not a lot of alternatives, not a lot of options, I just did the work in front of me. I got my first job in recovery was moving furniture. I moved furniture for $8 an hour, 6 days a week. And it taught me, I didn't realize it then, moving sort of Mr. Miyagi'd me into an entrepreneurial mindset, not entirely, but I got this thing I picked up on really early in my recovery and in my work life was that having integrity, doing what I say I'm going to do, being the same person wherever I go, and a little elbow grease allowed me to outpace my colleagues, which is good news for me because I didn't have much else. I didn't have any education. I'm not particularly smart. I don't think I'm stupid either. I think I'm very middle of the road. I'm 5'10", bald white guy. I'm super average in most respects, at least in my starting point. So with no, real big advantages, what I realized was working harder than the person next to me and sticking to my guns when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, started to set me apart, even at that stage of life where I was moving furniture, living in a halfway house, all kinds of probation stuff I had to do. So, gosh, my career went through some ups and downs. I got involved. Let's see, it was my third job. So I moved furniture, then I repossessed cars briefly, very short, like 3 months. The guy, I'll just tell you this story. This is a good story. So I worked for this guy repossessing cars. Great guy, took a chance on me, knew I was in recovery. I was just coming up on a year and took a chance on me, paid me more than I was making moving furniture and allowed me to drive a vehicle. I just got my license back. and allowed me to drive a vehicle home every day. So now I've got transportation for the first time in, a decade or more. And I was getting pretty good at the job. And the owner, Denny, he had a heart attack and eventually shut the business down. And in the interim, his son hired me. His son his son hired me for $500 a week was my base pay. I'm not sure what the math is on that. I think that's less than $30,000 a year.
Right.
Uh, but that was what I made, and I went from repossessing cars to working in an office. I only had a couple of shirts, a couple of like button-down shirts. I wanted to cover my tattoos and look a grown up as much as I could. I was 20, I was 27 at the time. And this guy was a millionaire and he was only a couple years older than me. And I'd never had access to a millionaire before, at least not like this, where I could just have a conversation like you and I are having.
Right.
And I would ask him questions and he would just answer them. And after a few questions, he said, "Hey man, have you read this book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad?" And I said, "No, I've heard of it." And he said, "Well, do me a favor. I don't want to not answer your questions, but read that book first. Then come to me with a solid list of questions. I'll buy you a cup of coffee and I'll do my best to answer all those questions." I said, "Okay." And I did. I read it, probably within a week or less and was fascinated by it. Came to him with my list of questions. He answered those questions to the best that he could from his experience. And more than, maybe not more than, but at least equal to his willingness to just help me, he also believed in me. I had an idea for a little business, and with a lot of doubt, I thought, I don't know if anybody would do that, if they would trust me. And he was like, "Oh, are you kidding?" He's like, "No, I know guys way dumber than you, less handsome than you that are crushing it right now. You can totally do this." And he talked to me that way. He talked to me like it was a no-brainer, that it was a foregone conclusion that me specifically, would go on to be successful. And nobody had ever had that kind of faith in me before, not that I could remember. And I did. When I left that company, I worked there for about 2.5 years. I started a small consultancy in the business world, nothing big at all. Not even a blip on the radar. But I jumped my income from about 30 grand a year to about a little over 100 grand a year. So for me, I more than tripled my income, and I didn't have a boss. I worked a lot. I worked, 70-hour weeks, but it it opened my eyes and it changed my lens of the world and of money and of taxes and of how organizations are built, how difficult it is, and yet how it's interesting. Depending on what kind of content you follow online, you'll get people that talk about how hard the entrepreneurial journey is, and they're right. There's plenty of things that are hard. I'm not so sure that I had, I had what was hard and what was not in the right boxes when I started. Some of the things that I thought would be impossible are not a big deal at all.
Right.
Whereas some of the things I hadn't even considered turned out to be real challenges and continue to persist. They persist in being challenges even, quite a few years into business and scaling, et cetera. Gosh, I got into this space, this business opportunity world where we sold like a business in a box, like for Amazon or for it might have been a Google outfit at the time. But this business in a box idea, we couldn't get our guys that sold advertising. They buy business in a box, 300, 500 bucks. And then the advertising team would sell them the same marketing that we would use on our business for $3,000, $5,000. And I worked that for a year. And during that time, I could not get my guys that sold advertising to not fudge the truth. And I had a crisis of meaning. This is early 2010. I ran that business for a year. In early 2010, I met with my attorneys and asked them to look at everything we were doing, ask them if we were safe, if we were ethical, if we were legal. And my attorney looked me in the eye and said, "You either need to sell something else or you need to pivot. This isn't illegal, but your days are going to be numbered doing this."
Right.
And so I just walked away from the whole thing, the whole space. I thought I had the Midas touch. I thought the next thing I do is going to blow, so what does it matter? And I went totally bankrupt, totally broke. I got married in 2010, so me and my new wife are totally broke. And it took us a few years to dig out of it. We've tried so many things. We found some success in a small ad agency. That's a great way to make money for people that are looking for some kind of a hustle to maybe get out of the 9 to 5 rat race. It's still a lot of work and it's still work for sure, but building websites, managing PPC spend, social media campaigns, this kind of thing is still very much outsourced in the SMB market. That we kind of rebuilt our lives doing that. It was just me and her, and then we ended up hiring somebody off of Upwork, and then we hired somebody else off of Upwork, and next thing you know, we had a little agency. We did that until we got into software. Our software business failed. It wasn't the worst failure in the world, but it hurt a lot. We had raised a little over $1 million to build a software platform. I think drag and drop website builder like Squarespace, but specifically for a niche of marketers. Because we were digital marketers, we'd built a product that we thought we would use, and we did some research. We asked some other agencies; they all said they'd use it. We did not get nearly. I mean, to be fair, we didn't have product market fit. We really didn't. It was a cool product in a lot of ways, but it doesn't matter what we think. The market needs to love it. I think we had 1,500 paying customers when we shut it down. In the world of software as a service, it's nothing.
Right.
If we had 150,000, we would have had something to talk about. We could have done another round, hired a bigger team. We ran out of money. We'd raised $1.25 million. We'd spent about 700 of it. And as we reworked the numbers, we needed another $1 million just to get to break even. I was living in Europe at the time. I just had my daughter, my oldest, had just turned 1. And I don't know how you get when you get stressed. Do you ever get canker sores like in the mouth?
I have in the past. Usually my back starts to hurt really bad.
Your back hurts when you're stressed. That's what cortisol does to you.
My lower back just tells me sit down.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I get canker sores when I'm stressed, and my mouth was so full of them I couldn't eat. Wow. I couldn't eat, and we decided to shut the company down. One of our customers offered to buy it, and we fire sold it. We sold it for less than we put in, but it meant we were able to give some of the money back to the investors. We came back to the States empty-handed with a 1-year-old. I took a commission-only sales job for a year, and during that time, we came up with the idea for building what the time the vision was a small rehab for men. We've grown into an agency now. We do a lot. It's like 7 businesses inside of our business.
Nice.
Yeah. So Cornerstone Healing Centers, we are 125 employees. We have 4 locations. It's not massive, but we're not tiny anymore either.
I love it, right? Because it just shows the resilience, right? Because we get such a bad name, right? That stigma that goes along with addiction or whatever, right? You're either that guy with the brown paper bag sitting behind a 7-Eleven drinking, or that guy or girl, whatever, on Skid Row sticking a needle in your arm, right? When you and I know, I mean, yes, you and I have had those bottoms, or I've been homeless.
Mm-hmm. I've been homeless.
3 years in prison. And, we have similar stories, because I went to one of those places where, I wake up the next morning after getting picked up from jail, right? After our first meeting, and I'm looking down the street, and there's a SWAT team busting some house down the right. And I'm thinking I'm going to some not classy place, but right. I'm not going back to, and it was funny because when I started going to meetings, I'm like, oh, cool. I've never been here. Right. Like, so I won't know anybody, but the more meetings we went to in our druggy buggy or with friends, I'm like,
I love that you use the term druggy buggy.
Right. All the time. Right. Oh shit. I've been there. I know you know what I mean? And I'm like, I just didn't remember at the time, but that's funny that you say the name of your place. My first place I ever worked for when I decided to get into the addiction space was Cornerstone of Southern California.
Right on. We're not related, but right on. Good name.
But it was a big place. The doctor, he's retired now, but he created something very massive, right? Like 40 houses, different levels of care, right? He's got a really good name, Dr. Stone. And, it was a great experience working for him. But back then, I was still in that survival mode, if you know what I mean. Like, I just want to do a good job. I want to help people. I'm not thinking about what am I going to do after this, or am I going to go back to school, or, and hearing you speak about like the failures, right? Like that's with anything in life, though. It doesn't matter if you're a recovering person or not, right? And you're in the entrepreneurial world, you're gonna fail.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you have to learn, like you did with your wife, to get back up, scrape yourselves off, brush yourselves off, and then figure out how to keep going, right? And do something different.
I think my time spent skateboarding might have helped contribute to that mindset as well.
Right. See, we got a lot in common. I used to skate and surf all the time when I was younger. Right. And but like you, I remember, just because I had no work history for 10 years, right? During my addiction. Like you, I was in, mom kicked me out of the house. I'm in and out of jail. I'm living on the streets. There's no, right? Like I can't tell them I'm a salesperson. I mean, I could if I wanted to lie, right? And go, but how successful was I? I wasn't very successful because I always did my product, right? And but they're good lessons if you look back like we can and think about those times, how resourceful we were, right? We made sure we got what we needed, right? And I, like, I've watched so many people in the program when I was newly sober, right? Like the guys I looked up to who had nothing when they got here. And like you, I'm sitting with guys that are making a ton of money. They're doing the right thing. They're teaching me, right? And that one important thing that I learned was they were the same guy when no one was looking, or the same lady that was known. And that's who after my fourth relapse, started to go, that's who I need to hang out with, right? Because and in my head, right, I hadn't seen my kids in 9 years. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to be a good dad, I want to see how these people treat each other, right? Because that's what my sponsor told me. He says, hang out with the people that have what you want, right? How they treat their wives or their husbands, or how they treat their kids, and how are they acting when they're away from a meeting? Are they just talking good in a meeting, and then behind, closed doors, they're totally opposite? And thank God I had great mentors, right? That sounded a lot like you. I learned integrity about doing what I say I was going to do when I was going to do it. Right. And that was hard for me.
So far. It goes so far in this world because it's rare.
And it is rare. Right. And you see it in the media, and I mean, this is not a political whatever, but you see it all over the news with politicians and
People don't trust the news at all anymore, left or right.
And that's why I tell people, they get mad at me if I like try to give them a counter. And I'm like, look, both sides to me in history show me that they're all crooked or corrupt in some form or fashion, right? Because how can our governor, who's on say a $200,000 a month or year salary, buy a $9.1 million home, right? And I'm getting off topic.
Hey, they're a good investor. They're good at investing.
I love it. Estil is like, I love it. So during that journey, right? Especially talk about the tough time when you came back from Europe, right? With your wife and your newly born daughter. Like, this is what I like for you to tell the audience, like how you didn't give up and share those struggles, because they would need to see, and I need to see, right? Like, this is why I started the podcast, is not just from people in recovery, but anybody who's gone through rough times, what that resilience looks like. Does that make sense?
1000%. So I took a job at a company called Rebath. They're a big bathroom kitchen remodeler. And I ran 3 leads a day, 6 days a week, just working my butt off. Didn't know much about bathroom remodeling, but I learned pretty fast. And I'm a pretty good, decent salesman. So I went out there and just worked. I needed to provide for my family. I had 3 years worth of sweat equity. I was worth about 6 million on paper, and it dissolved overnight. I mean, literally overnight. So I moved back from Europe. I've been pitching at digital marketing conferences in the UK, in London, and and living abroad and living in Norway and doing all this stuff. And then next thing you know, we're dead broke and we don't have any income. So, well, I guess we're moving back to Arizona. And we moved back here. We moved in with my father-in-law. He was living in a rented house, nice part of town, but we're in a spare room in his rented house. The three of us, me, my wife, and my daughter, who's 1. And so I got to work. I knew I could sell, and I took a commission-only sales job. It's not, we wouldn't call it door to door, but it's outside sales. They give you leads, Home Depot and all that stuff. So I worked Home Depot leads, and I sold bathroom remodeling to anybody that wanted it. And you can build a life on that. I want to be fair. You can really build a life on that. I didn't make bad money at all. I think I was making 160 a year there. But that's not a salary. That's based on my own steams, and I worked a lot of hours. And it was during that time we had moved into a slightly bigger place, getting to making money again. We got ourselves back out of debt, bought my wife a car, and she got one of those VW. What's the VW SUV that's pretty slick? The Atlas. She got a VW Atlas. It was pretty cool. And I got a little Audi A4. I think a $27,000 car. It was nice. It was very clean little car. And and we were starting to build a life out of that. In fact, the guy I was working for was offering me management position, not like, hey, I want you to do this today, but trying to, till the soil for the future. Like, hey, you keep performing. We have a management position for you. It pays, it's got a $200,000 or $250,000 base, and there's some bonuses in there and such. That's good. You can absolutely build an amazing life. I mean, that's already in the top, 10, maybe top 8% of earners. That's a great income. And while I was starting to think like maybe that's what my future looks like, I still have this thing in me. I have this itch to do something bigger, to be at the helm, to create value and market it. Selling somebody else's value is great. There's nothing wrong with that. But I was sitting in a coffee shop doing paperwork in between appointments, and I got into a conversation. I'm an extrovert, a lot like you. I just get in. I make fast friendships. I get into conversations with strangers all the time. Drives my wife nuts. So I'm sitting in a coffee shop having a deep conversation with a stranger who he's sitting there working also, and he's in digital marketing. He's asking me what, you know, and I told him the name of the company that I had just, I don't like saying we exited because that's not a fair assessment. We sold, we were lucky to get any money for it. But I told him about the company we had just sold, gotten out of, and he was familiar with the company because we weren't nobody. We just didn't make it.
Right.
So he'd heard of us, and he kind of looked at me and he said, "And what are you doing now?" And I said, "I'm selling bathroom remodeling." He was like, "Why don't you sell marketing?" He's like, "Dude," he's like, "I have an agency and I need somebody like you to help me build a team." And I said, "Okay, I'm listening." So we had me sign an NDA because everything's a big secret, and we and we sat down two or three times to really unpack his business model to see if I could see what I thought and see if I could contribute some real horsepower to his outbound sales efforts. And he only serviced the treatment industry, all behavioral healthcare industry. He had a few clients, and he was looking to take on more. And as and I'm a 12-step guy. I'm a sober guy. I've sponsored lots of guys in halfway houses, sober livings, and various treatment centers over the years. So I'm adjacent to it. I know about it, kind of. I didn't know how hard it was or if you could make any money doing it. So, but with this guy, I had like a behind the scenes look at some of the financial metrics. And it's not a get rich quick business by any stretch. The profit margins, I'll tell you right now, are about 20%. So you want to make 200 grand, you got to make $1 million.
Right.
I mean, it's fair to Midland. It's worthwhile. I'll tell you this, what I didn't, I don't know if I gave quite a fair estimation to is how difficult the regulatory landscape is. It is tricky. I mean, it's behavioral healthcare. So you're working with Department of Health Services. You're working with federal funds. If you're in the Medicaid space, you're working with Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, Optum. I mean, there's a lot going on. My chief operations officer says we don't have a healthcare system. When people start to throw stones at the healthcare system, oh, the healthcare system here is broken. And he's like, you're looking at it, you have it framed wrong. It's not a system. It's a convergence of business plans. Some of them overlap, some of them conflict. It's not designed together. There's no architect. And when you look at it through that lens, a lot of it makes a lot more sense. And so the regulatory side is probably the tougher side. Beyond the regulatory environment, we've learned and had to go through I think the growing pains of any organization that wants to grow, and that is taking something from a startup. When we started, we were 8 employees, and growing, we could have an all hands meeting in an office this size.
Right.
And it didn't interrupt the day. We could have an all hands meeting for an hour. It really wouldn't mess up the day. Whereas as we started to grow and you get out of the small business mindset where as the CEO, I also am the janitor. I'm also, I also drive people to the gym and I train them. I also run group occasionally. I also do intakes. I'm also answering the phones. And as we grew,
Talking for just a second.
yeah,
I want everybody to understand that, right? Like Estil is telling you, like, he doesn't just sit in an office and tell everybody, here, do this, do that, right? I mean, this is from what I've learned from masterminds I belong to and people I hang around with. Like, I know guys like you that run companies, but they're not afraid to go clean the toilet,
100%.
be boots on the ground and help a client out, or his staff member, you know what I mean, or her staff members. I know, and that's where I look up to guys like you, because that's the kind of legacy. It might be work, but you're leaving that for your children, because they're going to see
100%.
dad and go, wow, dad did everything right. He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, and that's what I strive to be. But sorry for interrupting, but
No, not at all.
I wanted
It's
to have everybody pay attention to that.
There's a dichotomy to doing everything. So I think we should continue to talk about this topic because if you're not willing to do that stuff, you may not be cut out for entrepreneurship. That's what founding looks like. Founding is messy. Roles are what's a good word for it? They're completely interwoven and not in some sort of an architecture fashion. They're not designed like you might have 3 or 4 people or less than 10 people in a startup company, whether it's software, whether it's service based, whether it's, healthcare based. And while some guy might do more sales because he's good at it, and some guy might do more customer service because he's good at it, everybody kind of does a little of everything in a startup. And a startup timeline is based off of product market fit, traction, and then your ability to scale. So assuming that you have good product market fit, people like it, you get some real traction, you can pay your bills, you can afford to pay salaries, you're making payroll. I mean, the next question is, how much farther can we go? How many more lives can we touch? How much more value can we deliver? And that's where learning how to, so that's the other side of the dichotomy. This is where I had to learn how to not run all the groups, not do all the intakes. How can I spend, if I can eliminate some of the things that other smarter people, to be honest, smarter than me, can do some of these tasks, what then if I can free up half of my day, 5 days a week, that's 20 plus hours. Now, my job as CEO at the helm is to take the infinite world of possibilities, compare that against our finite resources and timeframes, and figure out what should our next 5 moves be. And that becomes the role more and more. Listen, I will still run a group from time to time, but it's pretty rare. We're in our 8th year now. So it's pretty rare that I'll go and run a group or I haven't done an intake in years now, but most of what I do now is working with my executive team, and we're looking at the next 5 moves. How can we deploy resources and on what time frame? Because so much of what we do in scaling, and scaling's new to me. I've never scaled a company bigger than this before. We've never had this many people and their livelihoods and their families depending on how the organization does. Never to this length before. So scaling is what we work on. And as we look at scaling, we can determine let's say we determine what the next move is. It's a new facility, it's a new program, et cetera. Then we feel good about the next phase of growth, but then we have to figure out it's a risk to open a new facility, to open a new program. How much risk? Like the next task is to quantify the risk, and then see if we can mitigate the risk. You can't eliminate it. There's nothing that's guaranteed. We spend hundreds of thousands or even $1 million on advancing a new program. There's no guarantees it's going to work. So we've got to, what can we do? And research is probably the lowest hanging fruit to try and mitigate our risks. So we're not risk averse. Rather, we have gotten better. I wouldn't say we're great at, but much better at ascertaining risk, quantifying how much money will this take? How long will it take? What are the 20, 30% of shit that can go wrong that we're not accounting for? And And what can we do to try and whittle that down so that our chances of success are higher? And that's sort of become what my job largely is. What's the next move we're going to do, or two or three moves that we're going to do, and how can we mitigate the risk so that we can get closer to some semblance of assurance of success? Because we want to grow. There's a lot of people depending on us. Not to mention the clients that we serve is ever growing, and there's a massive demand. We opened in 2018 with 10 beds. 10 beds. Today we're 162. And so we've grown 16x. And we have 7 different lines of business. We started with just one. So we do a whole lot of stuff and we help a whole lot of people. And we're full, we're slammed. So when I look at the future, it's not like, oh, what are we going to do? It's like, of the handful of things that are good for our clients, that's good for the community we serve, that we can get paid to do, because that's an issue.
Right.
Like, we're not a nonprofit. We need to feed our families. The doctors, clinicians, and navigation staff that work here all need to feed their families, pay their mortgages. So we want to make sure that the very difficult work that we're doing, we get paid for. But what is the next of the 2 or 3 things that is the less risky, that is the most helpful that we can do? And that's sort of been our pattern. And it sounds fairly concise when I say it like that coming out of my mouth, but I mean, it feels messy when we do it. It feels messy. My chief operating officer likes things in boxes. He's very operational. It's great.
But I like what you're talking about because, right, in our field, right, like you see them all the time. Places come and go, right? Because they either, right, because you've done everything, right? So now that you can hire people and work on the strengths you have to, like you said, to see what the next 3, 4, 5 steps are. How can we mitigate the risk and that, right? That frees you up to do that, right? Because in our field, like I've seen them, and you probably have in your 21 years almost of doing this. It's, I mean, just being sober, right? Like places come and go, like that gentleman I told you about, my former employer, Dr. Stone, right? But he was like you. I'm sure he started with 2 houses, right? And he scaled it, right? And got systems in place so he could work on building the business, and I guess what I'm getting at, right, is you're going to skin your knees. You're going to learn as you go, right? And we have a tough population that you and I work with, right? Because but you're right. The demand is there, and it's right. Even when COVID happened, right, that all the mental health and
we grew significantly during that time,
right, got worse because people that were going to meetings are now told you can't go to meetings and you got to sit in your house and do a Zoom meeting. And right, it was, and because if I'm a sponsor, like you said, and I'm so used to going to a meeting, hugging my friends and talking, the meeting before the meeting and then the meeting after the meeting.
Yeah, when I first, my wife and I, when we were first dating, she asked me, "Why does it take 3 hours to go to a 1-hour meeting?" Meeting before the meeting, and there's a meeting after the meeting.
That's what my wife asked you, because she's a normie, don't tell her that, but she would go, like, you have a 7:30 meeting. You told me it's over at 8:30, but you don't get home till you leave early and you don't get home till 9:30 or almost sometimes 10. I go, well, there's a meeting after the meeting. It usually happens in the parking lot. We're all shooting the shit. And she goes, oh, okay, cool. Yep. But I mean, like, I want to ask you, right? Because I want the people to understand, like, imagine where Estil has come from, right? If you heard him in the beginning, homeless, right? He hit a rock bottom and he's right. Like, success doesn't happen overnight, but it's that consistency. And right, like you and I learned in the beginning, right? I was the same way. Once I had that last relapse, I just put my head down. I'm going to do what I have to do to stay sober, period. And I've noticed that over time, right, things always got better. But yeah, I had rough times, right? I would lose a job or this or that. But no matter what, I wouldn't pick up that drink or that drug, because I knew that as long as I did that, there would be hope. And then I'd always have these people. I always call it divine intervention, right? They always pop in my life. And like you today, like you pop, you're my guest. And I'm like, man, I'm like thinking to my head, okay, God, this happened for a reason, right? because it doesn't matter what the business is, right? As an entrepreneur, right? You just have to be willing to do the hard work and never quit on yourself, right? Because I don't know if you follow Andy Frisella, right? He's the owner of First Form out in Missouri.
Yeah.
And I love his story.
Supplement guy, yeah.
First 10 years, he only made $50,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now he's a multimillionaire with multiple companies, but he always, I love what he says. He said, especially like to our naysayers, like for you and I, right? Like, oh, I bet you that guy ain't gonna stay sober. Like, after 4 relapses, I can't blame him, right? They're putting bets down. Like, I don't think Matt's gonna. Thank God my sponsor had my back and just go watch. Yeah, he is. But anyway, my point being is, he always says that the best revenge on any doubters or anybody that hates you or anybody that's against you is personal excellence. Like, don't worry about what they think or say about you. Just keep plugging and doing your best. Right. And
I couldn't agree more.
Right. And today, I have Estil, and he's totally describing what Andy talks about, right? Like, he's had his setbacks, gets back on the horse, the saying, and he keeps going, and look at him now. And he's creating something big, right? And helping people. And I think that's important for guys like you and I. And I think that's why we have long-term recovery, at least for me and you, right? The more we help and give back, like they say, you can't keep it if you don't give it away, right?
100%.
That's our foundation, right? So that's why, and then I have you on here, and that's my what keeps me going. No, don't ever give up on myself, because Estil's proven that you just keep going and you just do the work and it gets better.
Yeah, well, there's a lot in there, what you just said. First of all, yeah, when I was my first year or so, and I was like moving furniture and then repossessing cars, I had friends that were going to work in treatment, and I thought, man, that sounds like a nightmare. I already have to come home to these folks all day. I mean, at night, I wouldn't want to go babysit them during the day. So, and a lot of those guys that stayed sober, they learned how to have a program separate from their job. And so when I didn't get into the treatment space till I was, 13, 14 years in. So by the time I was in the treatment space, those are already habits that are in my life, because I didn't work in treatment the first, decade plus. So I have a recovery life. I have my routines, my home groups, service commitments, all that stuff. And then I've got my work life. And then I got married and I started having kids, and then we've got a family life, and learning how to juggle all those things. People talk about work-life balance, and I don't know how else to describe it, but it's balance, counterbalance, just juggling all the time. And then what else did you say that I was just, you were talking about the commitment, the sticking with it, that resilience comes from doing it again after you suck at it. And even though you suck, and even though you may not get much better at it anytime soon, just continuing to stick with it. It doesn't matter. That's how kids learn to walk. It's how they learn to ride bicycles. Why would that be different in me learning how to lead a godly life instead of, a drug addict's life? Why would that be different in trying to build a company rather than work for a company? I mean, it's not. It's the same principle. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just love what you said, because I had a friend who was going to school to become a counselor when after my, I was 30 days sober, and he made it look so cool. I was almost like the Marlboro Man, right on the, they made smoking look cool because he's a cowboy and whatever.
Yeah.
But he'd always pull up to our meetings, right, on his Harley with his backpack. I'm like, where you come from, Ben? And he's like, oh, I'm finishing up school. I'm going to be a counselor, right? I was 30 days sober. I told my sponsor, I'm going to do the same thing. He goes, no, you're not. He goes, just work your program, work on yourself, and then I'll tell you when. And I did exactly what he said. Like, dove head first into the steps. I went to meetings, I worked, and I got my first job at a year, right? Working in treatment for that guy. And then at 2 years, because I had forgot about it, he hits me up. He goes, you still want to be a counselor? And I said, oh yeah. I go, yeah, I do. Matter of fact. So I went back to school and I became a counselor, and I've been one for almost 16 years. And right. But it's like you said, like I started my private practice, right? And it's scary, right? I mean, a facility is one of my clients, but it doesn't feel like I've broken off on my own yet, right? It's kind of like that safety net, like,
sure.
like, have my 9 to 5, but I'm gathering, right? Because some people have brought some things to my attention and said, dude, you got to start your own place. Like you got to do your own thing. And you'd
Sure.
be really good at it, right? And I don't know about you, but here in California, like I see some ugly things happening with treatment. You know what I mean? And I'm like, it doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, I think any space, any vertical industry has people that are, bad actors in it. But yeah, I don't know what's going on in the California landscape, but in here in Arizona, we had some bad stuff go on the last few years. That's sort of subsided recently.
Right. And that's why it makes it hard for people to get the care they need, right? If you're in a like detox residential, because insurance is like they don't want to pay, they don't. And I'm navigating that like I do. So from supervising, right? Like now I'm doing what they call I've stepped in my head, I've stepped down so I can understand the insurance side a little better, right? And I do the UR reviews, right? So I document. And at first I was like, I don't want to do that. Like I wrote enough notes. I don't want to do it. But
Probably learning a lot.
But exactly. I'm learning so much more doing that, right? Like what they look for documentation wise. And so
correct. And clinicians don't like when revenue cycle people tell them how to chart. But I mean, I remember a conversation, years ago, about billing, about revenue cycle management with some of our newer clinicians, and they were like, yeah, like we would pull up a chart of somebody with 6 days sober, and they're like, they're doing great. It's like they're not doing great. In your eyes, you've seen improvement over the last week, but the truth is they're in high risk statistically of of relapse, overdose, and death. You need to write that because we need to keep them in treatment at least 5 more days. In utilization review, particularly with private insurance, you're fighting for 5 days at a time a lot of the, very often.
And it's funny that you say that, right? Because, and thank God I built rapport with with most of the case managers. So when I call them and say, hey, look, I'm going to teach you something right now, right? I see in your notes, you're saying they're doing great, like, and they're still detoxing, right? Like, you just have to word it, not that they're horrible, but they're still struggling because if you put it in front of them, they're going to use no matter what. You're like, they could tell you they're on top of the world. They're grateful to be here, but you put that drug or drink in front of them, I'm out. See ya.
Yeah. Coming up with what's clinically an appropriate assessment of somebody's progress throughout a continuum is, I mean, learning how to articulate that is it's an art. There's an art to it because you don't want to be dishonest, and that's not what it's about. It's also not being dishonest about how good they're doing because you see the light. You might have a patient that's 2 or 3 weeks in the lights are coming on. They're having an experience. They don't believe in God. All of a sudden they're praying. I don't do well in crowds. All of a sudden they're leading, they're sharing well, etc. That's good. And while you want to highlight the progress to the patient, highlighting progress that looks good versus what can be proven clinically is not a great idea in your charting. Because if the insurance company decides they're good, then they're going to say, cool, kick them out, send them to AA or whatever. We're done.
That's exactly what they do. Say, oh yeah, lower level of care.
It's not enough.
Right? Like exactly.
Not enough.
And I mean, I've had it in other places where I've worked where, I mean, the person's like near death, right? Because they have just beat themselves up physically. Like, I mean, they're emaciated, right? Because all they've been doing is using, they can't even lift their head off the pillow. Oh, 5 days of detox is cool. Send them to RTC. And you're like, what? But that's how, like, I've learned from my mentors. And when they say, you're not going to lie, but you got to tell them the struggle. Like I had a guy, for instance, Estil, they said, Max, you need to go over to the emergency room. This guy's coming in. He's going to be your guy, right? But I want you to go check him out. So I go, okay. So I go, right? And he's about my age, maybe a little bit younger. And the nurse goes, yeah, go talk to him, right? So I go talk to this guy, right? We have a full-on conversation. He looks coherent. Yes, I can smell the alcohol. She takes me out and she shows me his BAC.
What is it?
0.47.
For those of us that are listening that aren't familiar with that language, that means 47% of his blood circulating through his body is alcohol.
Alcohol.
That's half of your bloodstream.
Right. And he didn't slur his words. He was totally like coherent, like me and you are talking, right? And
I've
then
seen
the
the same
next
thing.
the next day I go to detox and I go, hey, how's it going? So and so, my name is Max. You remember me? And he goes, well, who are you? And I'm like, you don't remember? We had a 20-minute conversation yesterday. And he goes, I don't know who you are.
He's probably in a blackout.
Yep. And and then it started kicking in the detox. But
Yeah, he starts shaking, and seizure risk starts becoming operative. Yeah,
right,
alcohol detox is no joke.
it's no joke, right? And that's why I'm glad we're having this conversation. And for everybody in the audience, right? We're not trying to sell you on meetings or treatment or whatever, but what I want to get across to you is, what Estil has shared with us. It goes for everybody. It doesn't go just for us recovering people or, as they say, normies, right? Like life is going to be tough and it's how you deal with it, right? You like that? I love that famous quote from Mike Tyson, right? Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth, right? Estil puts his fist, right? And all of us have been through that. And you've been through it. I've been through it. And I love that what you've shared with us so far and how you've bounced back, right? Where you just, okay, I'm going to learn. Basically, what you've told the audience is, I'm going to learn this lesson. It didn't work out, but it's not going to stop me, right? Because the biggest thing I try to teach people or like clients is, no, never give up on yourself. Don't let anybody tell you you cannot do something. I do that with my kids or my grandkids, right? Like I have 10 grandchildren with numbers 11 and 12 coming in the end of May and June. And right. And that's the kind of legacy I want to leave, is like, oh, what we talked about, right? Grandpa said he was going to do when he said he was going to do it. He was a stand-up guy. He loved us. And, we learned so much from just watching grandpa, right? And hopefully my great grandkids and all that. And the way things are going, who knows? I might be a great grandfather by the time I'm 70, 80 years old. You know what I mean? Anyway, but this has been a great time, Estil, and I've learned so much from you. And I'm sure if you have time, we can talk after. But I want to ask you my questions, right? Like the first one, sure. Same as my podcast and the book I wrote, Fearless. So what does fearless mean to you? And how does that show up in your life on a daily basis?
It means if I've looked at a risk and it's the next indicated thing in front of me, which is you're starting at scratch. There's a million things you can get interested or involved in, but when God's moving your heart and the thing in front of you, the uncomfortable conversation, starting the business, taking the first client, attempting the first thing, if that's the next indicated thing in front of you, you might as well do it now. Shorten the distance between now and that uncomfortable thing, because you can choose to ignore it, which will leave you unsettled, being a divided person, right? Or the only third option is to just prolong it in procrastination, like, oh, I'm going to get to that eventually. But that just causes anxiety, sleepless nights. I mean, to me, fearlessness it's not the absence of fear at all. It's packing up the courage to just, and I like to do it quickly. I like to do it as quickly as I've learned that as I've aged, that if there's something I don't want to do and it's indicated that I do it, let's just go do it right now. Exactly. And shortening that time frame and just going to the uncomfortable thing. First of all, I always survive. I've been here, I'm almost 48, so I've survived all those things. They haven't killed me. And while some of them haven't worked out great, I would venture to say that most of the things I've been afraid of trying, afraid of doing, have worked out as part of God's plan. He was placing a brick for a structure that I wasn't even, that he's architecting, that I wasn't even aware of, that was better than anything I could have planned. And had I not taken that step, we wouldn't be this far along. So fearlessness is, it's acting in spite of fear.
I love it. Right. And I totally get that as I get older, right? I have to shorten that time because my brain will go, okay, I'll start rationalizing why not to do it. Right. And then I'll kick myself in the butt if I don't do it. So I love that. Next question, happiness. As you see, I put a Y in it. Knowing I put a Y in happiness, what does happiness mean to you? And how does that look like in your life on a daily basis?
I know that the word happiness sometimes gets a bad rap in the media, but it's, to me, I feel happiest, most content uh, when when I'm when I'm gaining traction on the handful of things that I'm interested in pursuing. Because life isn't a static target. The things that I want to do are all moving targets. They're rhythms that I'm trying to align with. It's parenthood. It's my relationship with my wife. It's my relationship with God. It's my ability to serve others in the community, and it's my ability to provide for both my family and for the community. And I like to work out. I want to be in shape. Like, that's about all I can fit into a day or a week or a month. I mean, that comprises my life. And when I'm in the rhythm of doing that, I feel great. I feel great. I was able to spend time with my kids this morning over breakfast and love on them before I left the house to hit the gym before I get to work. And gosh, a friend of mine and I went to go visit a friend in the hospital. And before I got to the office, my life is full and rich when I'm doing the things that I feel called to do. It's ignoring the things that I'm called to do that I think that really brings unhappiness to me. So I feel when I'm and I don't have to be perfectly dialed, but when I'm going after the things that I think bring value to the world and to my family, that's what I get something out of bringing those things to others. That's when I'm the happiest. When I'm just living my life as a dad and a business owner and a sober guy trying to help others and as a husband.
Can't get any happier than that, right? When all
Uh,
those things are falling into place. I love it.
Life is full and rich. It's very good.
I love it. I love it. It's been a great time spending with you today. Um, God, I've learned so much from you, right? Like, hopefully, I don't talk you off afterward, but I got some questions for you afterward. But if my audience wants to get a hold of you, Estil, and they want to, or they know someone in your area that needs your services, right? They got a loved one
Sure.
who's suffering, or they're suffering, or they just want to ask you questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's sort of two different places to go. If you're looking for help specifically, if you got yourself or a loved one who needs help, mental health, drug addiction, alcoholism, that sort of thing, you can look up cornerstonehealingcenter.com. We have a great admissions team. They answer the phones 8 to 8 every single day of the week, and they're amazing. And most of them are in recovery themselves. They understand the landscape here. If we can't help you, we will find you a good place that can help you. If you want to hear more of my nonsense, my ranting, my opinions, I'm on Instagram at Estil, Estil_Wallace. We have a YouTube account that's the same, Estil Wallace, and that is our podcast, Struggle and Strive. We talk about all kinds of things from recovery stuff to making money stuff to relationship and marriage stuff.
Love it. You heard him, everybody. Wow, man, we packed in a lot. I love it. And like I said, thank you for being here. I had such a great time. I mean, I'll probably bring you back because we got so much more that we could probably
Oh,
unpack.
absolutely.
But I would love to have you come back. But you're not quite off the hook today just yet, right? I get to ask you my favorite question
Please.
of all my guests, and it goes like this: Estil, what is the one piece of advice you could give my audience to help them grow as human beings and become better people?
Use use your mind, clean up your mind from all of the victim mentality. And people in recovery often have horrific stories. And I'm not here to tell you to degrade that or devalue that or minimize that. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, regardless of what has happened to you, don't let what's happened to you define your life. You can decide to go out there and live however big a life you want to, whether that's to travel the world, whether you want to play music, whether you want to create art, whether you want to go into business as an entrepreneur, whether you want to raise children different than the house you grew up in, whatever it is you want to do, know that you can do that. But you've got to let go of being a victim. You've got to let go. Victims don't recover. Victims don't make it very far. If that's part of the beauty of powerlessness, right? If if this was done to me, then there's no way out. If I admit powerlessness and can give myself to God, and God restores sanity and therefore agency, I can do something about this. God brings me from the depths, from the gates of hell to a place of like, hey, this is where normal people live. Like, well, what do you want to do with that? What do you want to do now that you have the same, give or take, the same opportunity that everybody else has? Brush your teeth, fix your credit, go live your life. You're free. The credits on your horror story have rolled. It's over.
Right.
Go live your life. Don't be a victim.
Love it. Yeah, I hope you listen to that, everybody. Do not be a victim, because there's so much more out there to be grateful about. Sorry. God, I love it. I had such a good time.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for being here, Estil. You heard him, everybody. If Estil made you think, if he taught you something, if he made you smile, and my famous, if he made you go, I like that. Please go to iTunes and leave a 5-star review so more people can find the podcast. And again, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are in this world. This is Max from the Fearless Happiness Podcast. Until next time.
Are you tired of being weighed down by life's traumas and struggles? Join the Fearless Happiness lifestyle and let us guide you toward a brighter future. Explore our past podcast episodes and get a copy of the Fearless Happiness book to ignite your inner strength. If you or someone you love is battling addiction or facing challenges related to unresolved trauma, know that we are here for you. Visit maxnijst.org, maxnijst.org, and take the first steps toward finding your fearless happiness. Thank you for listening. This has been a production of Fearless Happiness.